A way has been prepared for us, a holy highway through the wilderness that if we follow, none of us will be led astray. Amen. Now, the first thing you should do when you start writing a sermon is to make sure that the place where you're preaching actually does the thing that you're going to start your sermon off with. Because normally, on this Sunday, I would have started this sermon with something such as, very dramatic, something has changed. And then I'd point to the Advent wreath and let you notice that today's candle was pink. And then I would say, you would notice a visible difference in our Advent wreath, that on the third Sunday, in churches all across the country and the world, we don't light a third purple candle, but instead 2 purple candles and a pink candle. The solemn purple of deep preparation giving way for a momentary glimpse at the light, this hopeful shade of rose. So you have to be like me and just pretend. But it's this moment, this sign that tells us the waiting is nearly over. The darkness is receding, and we are called to rejoice. It's admittedly a strange thing to attempt at this time of year. As the days climb into darkness earlier and earlier, the news and the conflict seem unsolvable. Another crisis, another raid, another shooting, another. None of us would be faulted if joy became something that felt impossible to manufacture, if let alone maintain. However, on the third Sunday of Advent, the world's seemingly relentless sorrow becomes a moment of intentional theology. A moment where we decide to rejoice, even in the face of darkness and doubt and anxiety. A moment where we get to glance ahead to the birth of a child who will bring about a new way of living. A way that's going to change each of us, change the whole world. But we're not there yet because it is Advent. It's not yet. But what we are called to do, though, is to lean into the tension. And this tension, the call to rejoice rather than accepting the reality of doubt, is captured perfectly by John the Baptist when he says, "Are you the one who is to come, or are we to wait for another?" It's this profound Advent question coming from a great fiery prophet of the wilderness, and perhaps it's tinged with a little bit more doubt and fear and possibly even hopelessness than we sometimes read it. Because the context is John is in prison. His bold ministry has been silenced. He is cut off and confined, and his faith just might be wavering. And he asks a question that haunts every generation when things get stalled, dark, or uncertain. Is this really it? Have we pinned our hopes on the right person? Is this Jesus person really the Messiah that we've been promised? Now, John knew his scriptures. He was looking for the Messiah foretold in the Old Testament. And he was looking for a very specific kind of Messiah, one of fire and judgment and political upheaval. He expected a God of vengeance, the divine judge who would sweep away all the wicked and restore Israel's glory overnight. He expected a warrior. But what he got was a carpenter from Nazareth who spent his time healing peasants and eating with tax collectors. This difference between John's expectation and Jesus' reality undeniably caused this question. It's a question that still, I think, rings true 2,000 years later. Are you the one we've been waiting for? And maybe for good reason. Jesus never seems to offer a theological treatise in the way that we expect, even today. He doesn't send an overt political promise. He tells us to love our enemies. He doesn't tell us to seek power. He tells us that the least shall be first. The last hired worker will earn the same wage. Your faith has made you well. These are statements that do not fit in with what we expect, even if we've heard them multiple times. And so when he tells John's followers to go and tell him, just go and tell him what you've seen and what you've heard, he does so because the evidence isn't in what they thought was going to happen, but what is happening right now. The blind receive their sight, the lame walk, the lepers are cleansed, the deaf heard, and the dead are raised, and the poor have good news brought to them. It doesn't take a Bible scholar, especially in the Episcopal Church, because we have it in our bulletin, to say that this is just an echo of the promises that's happening in Isaiah 35. And listen, you can simply read it that way, and it is still a good way to read it. That he is just fulfilling the scriptures. That Jesus is like, oh yeah, before all this happens, I got to check that box. But the list is more than a formality. The list it's proof. Because in Isaiah, we're told that when the Messiah arrives, the wilderness and the dry land shall be glad. The desert shall rejoice and blossom. Then the eyes of the blind shall be opened, and the ears of the deaf unstopped, and the lame shall leap like a deer. It's not a militaristic or even political prophecy. It's one of restoration and reversal. It's a glorious vision where the landscape of human suffering is transformed into this garden of delight. It's a reminder that the dry places of our lives, the places of fear and affliction and injustice, will suddenly become springs of water. And the ultimate sign of God's arrival is not that the world is imperably broken, but that the afflicted, the broken, the trampled upon are made whole. And what is the result, then, of this great restoration? It's a word that comes easily off our lips, I think. Joy. Isaiah says that they shall obtain joy and gladness, and sorrow and sighing shall flee away. And Jesus is telling John the same thing. I am not fulfilling the prophecy of wrath you expect, but this deeper prophecy of restoration, healing, and joy. And this is the irrefutable proof of joy. God's kingdom is real, not because of a display of power, but because of unrelenting commitment to mercy and justice. And so, if that's the proof, if the proof that Jesus gave to John is that the blind see and the poor have heard good news, then we, 2,000 years later, must look for the same evidence to affirm our own hope. We are not asked to passively wait for miracles. We are asked to look for where God is already moving. The blind will receive their sight in the spiritual awakening of those in places like recovery communities who realize that they are loved and worth saving. The lame will walk and the deaf will hear is the restoring of voice and dignity of the marginalized and silenced so that they can stand up and also be heard. And the poor having the good news brought to them is the providing of verifiable evidence that Christ is present by delivering not just words, but tangible relief, food, shelter, security, to transform the hardships of poverty into hope. Now this is where I would again say, look at the pink candle. It's not just a sign that Christmas is near. It is a sign that this evidence, this proof, is all around us. We are not waiting for an event that will happen later. We are rejoicing in the work that's happening now. And maybe more importantly, it's a reminder that we are all the proof. Jesus seems to understand that we need to hear this too. That we need to learn this lesson again and again. That we too are constantly searching for a different sort of Messiah. Or maybe, and for good reason, we just no longer believe that the universe can actually arc towards justice. Because everything else we see seems to point in the exact opposite direction most of the time. And so we too want that warrior king. But we're reminded that we get the healing servant. And as a result, even though we don't want it, our joy then becomes something that is not fleeting or giddy, but instead it's a feeling of courageous patience. The courageous patience of the farmer who has already planted the seed and knows that the harvest is guaranteed. Guaranteed. We're not called to be, well, no, we are called to be patient. We're not called to be passive. Strengthening our hearts and actively planting seeds of justice, mercy, and healing as we wait for that time when once again we all get to sing and actually believe and see the effects of the world, that every heart will repair his inner room. And heaven and nature will sing, and heaven and nature will sing, and heaven and nature will sing. So go forth and be the evidence. Go forth and find your joy in the proof, so that we all can be the proof that the world needs to see. Amen.